Probably those mouth noises are not great on the old ears. Smoking the devil's Tootsie Roll Pop. I don't believe in God, and I vaguely believe that a guy like Jesus might have existed. I'm not a mythicist, but supernatural stuff, nah. However, I really appreciate some of the teachings of Jesus when he explains the need to have mercy over following the law. That's good stuff. That's really, I think that's an excellent lesson, whatever your religious take. These laws, like the example of, I will get to my application to the witnesses and my point, but the laws about the Sabbath and him healing, and how he said, you would pull, your sheep out of a hole. You wouldn't leave it over the Sabbath, and that's a death penalty. Working on the Sabbath is a capital crime. And he says the two laws are love God and love your neighbor. And great. I think that's great. I think those are great. Well, the first one, second one, yes. Second one is excellent. In many Watchtower publications, they talk about the Pharisees, because they love to bash on them, about how they would strain out the gnat and gulp down the camel, how they had all these petty rules about how, if you had nails in your shoes, was that work? Was carrying those nails in your shoes work on the Sabbath? And they would mock them for all of these petty little rules. Much like the parenting video, these rules are not explicitly written, but they are a natural consequence of the policies of the witnesses and the Watchtower Society. They have just as petty and just as stupid, if not more so, rules and regulations than the Pharisees did. And I will give you some examples, and to illustrate the sad, paranoid, anxiety-driven mindset of a witness. I know witnesses that will not go to Starbucks because the Starbucks mascot is the mermaid/siren. And those are mythological creatures, and that bothers their conscience because that seems like, I don't know, false worship, I guess. But it bothers them because it's a mythological creature. Less surprising, a bunch of people stopped watching WandaVision because they found out that the name of the character was the Scarlet Witch, which, I mean, that's easy to find out. Like, it doesn't take much Googling at all to figure that out. You don't have to be a comic nerd to figure that out. I know witnesses that would not see the movie Avatar, the James Cameron one with the big blue aliens, dances with wolves in space. I've said this before. But they wouldn't see it because the word avatar. Have you seen the definition of the word avatar? That means a vessel for a god. I'm not going to go see that movie. It's a science fiction movie. Have you never used the internet? We've used the term avatar for decades. It doesn't have anything to do with false worship. I know witnesses that will not buy Mission brand corn chips because it has a Spanish, I don't know the right word, Spanish church on it. That bothers them. Or they're worried that other people will be bothered by that, which is the real reason why many of these witnesses will not do things. This is also, this isn't consistent. This isn't all witnesses, but they all have the same flavor of this pettiness. I'm liking that I can gesture. I can see why David Splain likes his pointer, because I like having a little stick thing to gesture with. This is not universal. This is not in writing, but all witnesses have the same sort of petty nonsense that they stick to, these very small, very absurd things, because you are taught to fear displeasing God in any way, and also stumbling your brothers and your sisters, and they could be stumbled over the most minute, petty things. So you have to keep an eye out for the most sensitive witness in your congregation and make sure that you don't do anything that might bother them. which is absurd. You need to keep track of the opinions of 100 and something plus people and make sure that none of the actions that you do could bother any of them. My parents are very, very witnesses. They are uber dubs. My parents would not walk down a street that was decorated with Christmas decorations. It had lights run over it. All the buildings were decorated. They walked, so there's a street this long. They walked this enormous loop to go around it. We were with family. None of us had a problem with it. All of us were witnesses. We're like, what are you talking about? Why does this bother you? You're not celebrating. You're just walking past it. But it bothered my parents. So we walked 5 minutes. They walked 20 minutes. So we walked 5 minutes and then waited for them to get around their long oopy-doopy loop to meet up with us. It's absurd. My dad also refused to knock on my grandfather's door or open the door because there was a Santa Claus decoration hanging on it and he didn't want to touch it. Superstition. A lot of superstition. I joked about how I could trap him like a vampire by surrounding him with Christmas decorations because he'd refuse to touch them. So we would just make a ring of Rudolphs and he would be trapped there like a vampire with salt, unable to escape. But back to my point. Drinking Starbucks or buying Mission chips or walking down a street that has lights on it should not be a crisis. Jesus said that these petty things weren't important. He specifically said, my yoke is kindly and my load is light. They mock the Pharisees for having all these minutiae about what counts as work on the Sabbath, and they impose those exact same things on themselves. Because that is how they are taught to think. They are taught to be overly self-conscious, overly critical, overly aware of what all of the other witnesses' criticisms might be. However, the weakest conscience, the most annoying, petty person is the one that you have to set your, all your standards by, the things that they might find out about, lest they be stumbled or complain about you. It's absurd. It's really, really absurd. And it is the gulping down the camel and straining out the gnat. Okay, so you don't go to Starbucks because of its magical mascot. You don't see the movie Avatar because its name is a religious term. We've got a lot of religion. You pick a word at random out of the dictionary and it's probably got some religious connotation. And yet at the same time, you refuse to acknowledge the real problems with the Watchtower. CSA, shunning, blood, these sort of issues. You're fine with these things. You are fine with this doomsday superiority cult. And you are not fine with drinking overpriced coffee out of a cup with a mermaid head on it. It's very pharisaical. The witnesses are explicitly pharisaical in their writings. The Elders Book, the Branch Correspondence Guidebook, all their secret paperwork. They are very pharisaical. But on top of that, there's a self-imposed layer that each witness has their own set of absurd minutia that they have to live by. It is not a good way to live. You cannot live your life to that level of scrutiny, thinking that drinking Starbucks, eating a certain brand of corn chips, walking down a street is going to displease God and you might die. That's insanity. That's a greater level of insanity than the Pharisees saying whether or not having nails in your sandals counted as work. At least then they were under the Mosaic law and there was a death penalty for it. I would be concerned if I might accidentally violate something that had a death penalty associated with it. It's absurd, but there's a rational reason people would worry about it. There is no rational reason that you should be worried about the brand of corn chips or coffee that you're drinking. That's nuts. It is not a healthy way to live. It is not a healthy way to think.